The sun beat down hard over the cracked earth of Dry Creek, a forgotten town in the borderlands where dust blew more fiercely than kindness ever did. On the edge of the main street stood a wooden platform weathered from years of harsh sun and shameful business. Today it wasn't cattle or farm tools being auctioned, but a woman. Clara Whitley, only 25, stood still as a statue on the auction block, her wrists bound in front of her more for show than necessity. Her once fine dress, now patched and faded, fluttered slightly in the dry wind. The whispers of the townsfolk stung worse than the sun. Poor thing. Couldn't even give her husband a child. Barren as a stone, they said. Don't fetch much for a broken woman like that. Her cheeks burned with shame. Clara had tried to stand tall, but it was difficult when your dignity had been stripped layer by layer, first by her late husband's coldness, then by the accusations of his family, and finally by the auctioneer who listed her like a broken wagon wheel. "Widow Whitley?" the auctioneer called out, voice oiled with sarcasm. "Strong arms, obedient, childless, so no trouble there." "A bargain if you ask me. Who'll take her?" The crowd shifted. Men chuckled, spat, or looked away awkwardly. No one raised a hand. To them, she wasn't a person, just a burden. An infertile wife, no good for lineage or labor. Clara stared ahead, willing herself not to cry. Her entire life had shrunk to this one moment, being sold like scrap. Then, through the murmurs, the crowd shifted. A silence fell, the kind that cuts like a blade. From the edge of town, a tall Comanche warrior walked forward. His face was unreadable. Eyes like flint, hair braided and bound with bone and leather. He wore worn buckskins, but his posture was noble, quiet, dignified. A half-dozen townsmen stepped back instinctively. Most white folks still feared the Comanche, even though peace had been brokered years ago. Clara watched him approach, confused and terrified. The man didn't speak. He stepped up to the auction block, met Clara's eyes with a gaze so steady it almost knocked the wind out of her. Then, from a leather pouch tied to his waist, he pulled out a silver coin Mexican, old and rare, and handed it silently to the auctioneer. The crowd gasped. "That coin alone was worth a dozen horses. You sure?" The auctioneer stammered. "For her?" The Comanche gave a single nod. "You got a name, Injun?" The man's voice was deep and soft. "Tassani." "All right then, she's yours." The auctioneer cut the rope binding Clara's wrists. The moment the knot slipped free, so did something inside her. Her knees buckled slightly, but she caught herself. Her pride was the only thing they hadn't taken yet. Tassani didn't touch her. He merely gestured to the horse he'd tied. At the hitching post, Clara hesitated, then followed. What choice did she have? Stay here and rot, or ride into the unknown with a man who had bought her not with lust in his eyes, but something stranger. The townsfolk parted in uneasy silence as she passed. "Lord have mercy," someone whispered. She'd have been better off dead. Clara climbed onto the horse behind Tassani, trembling. Her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know where he came from, what he wanted, or what fate awaited her beyond the town limits. But for the first time in weeks, no one looked at her with pity or disgust. Tassani didn't speak as they rode out into the open plains. The sun began to dip low on the horizon, painting the land gold. Clara clutched the saddle horn and looked ahead. She was no longer property of the town. No longer the broken widow left to rot. No longer at the mercy of whispers. She belonged to a man now, yes, but he had not taken her. He had chosen her. And that, somehow, terrified her more than anything. The journey away from Dry Creek was long and silent. Clara sat stiffly behind Tassani on the painted Mustang, her arms awkwardly holding onto the saddle. She didn't dare touch him, not yet. The great plains rolled out in every direction, waves of golden grass swaying in the evening wind. The further they rode, the smaller her past life became. As the town faded behind the hills, so did her anger, her shame, and the voices of the people who had once called her useless. But fear still gripped her chest like a vice. Who was this man? What did he want from her? They didn't stop until the stars began to scatter across the sky. In a shallow basin nestled between hills, Tasani slowed the horse. Below them lay a Comanche camp lit with small fires, the scent of roasted corn and venison floating on the wind. Children's laughter rang out, dogs barked playfully, and women moved with the rhythm of routine and familiarity. Clara's stomach turned. She'd expected darkness, silence, maybe even savagery stories white folks like to whisper about Comanche camps. But what she saw below was not fearsome, it was home. Tasani slid off the horse and extended a hand to help her down. His touch was gentle but firm. She hesitated only a moment before placing her palm in his. Her feet hit the ground and she felt it. She was somewhere else entirely now, not just another land, but another life. They walked into the camp without ceremony. Heads turned, eyes widened. The chatter dimmed. Clara could feel the stares, the suspicion. A white woman arriving unannounced in a Comanche camp, especially one like her, was no small matter. A small group of children burst from one of the lodges and ran toward Tasani. Ata! One of them shouted, Father. There were 6 of them, ranging from a baby barely toddling to a boy who looked about 12. Clara stared in shock as they threw their arms around their father, laughing, clinging to him like vines. One of the younger girls, with big dark eyes and tangled braids, peered curiously at Clara. Who's that, Papa? The girl asked. Tasani knelt beside her and said something in Comanche. Clara didn't understand it, but the girl looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. Not approving, but watching. That's when the older girl stepped forward, maybe. 10 or 11, lean and tall with sharp features and wary eyes. I'm Casa, she said in English, her voice steady. You don't belong here. Clara flinched at the bluntness. But something in Casa's gaze, so fiercely protective, told her this wasn't about race or hatred. It was about family. This child had lost a mother. Clara was an outsider who dared to stand near her father. I'm Clara, she replied, keeping her voice soft. I don't want to cause trouble. You will, Casa said. Then turned her back and walked away. The moment passed, and the other children continued to examine Clara with cautious interest. One boy reached out and touched the frayed hem of her skirt like he'd never seen a woman dressed that way before. Another simply stared at her, as if trying to read her soul. Tasani motioned for her to follow him to a nearby loggia, circular structure made of poles and stretched hide. Inside was simple: a bed of pelts, a fire pit, a few belongings neatly arranged. It wasn't just a shelter. It was where someone had lived, where a woman, his wife, had once kept things warm and alive. Is this where she lived? Clara asked before she could stop herself. Tasani nodded. My wife. She died 2 winters ago. And now I'm to take her place? Clara's voice cracked. He looked at her, not unkindly. No one can take her place. You are not here for that. Then why? She whispered. Tasani's gaze turned toward the flickering firelight. His voice was quiet. My children have no mother. They cry at night, and I cannot answer them. I do not need another woman. I need someone who will not leave, someone who sees them. Clara's breath caught. No one had spoken to her like that, not even her husband. In all their cold years together, she sat down on the edge of the bedding, unsure if she was allowed to. You don't care that I can't give you more children? I already have children, he said simply. What I need is a heart that will not run when they scream or fall or cry for their mother. Clara looked at him, unsure what to say. Her heart ached not from fear, but from something deeper. He hadn't chosen her because she was young, or pretty, or useful. He'd chosen her because she, too, knew what it meant to be broken and left behind. In that moment, something shifted. She was no longer the widow on the auction block. She was in a place where being barren didn't make her worthless, only ready to become something else entirely. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm Clara had never known, strange, earthy, real. She awoke with the sun, the scent of smoke and damp hides thick in the air. The mornings were quiet but busy, women stoking fires, children fetching water, the men sharpening tools or preparing for hunts. No one told her what to do. No one offered kindness or cruelty. She simply existed among them, watched like a shadow. At first, Clara wandered the camp as a ghost, unsure of her place. The Comanche women passed her with narrowed eyes, speaking softly in their language. She felt the weight of their judgment, not because she was white perhaps, but because she was unproven. An outsider with no children, no skill, no kin. She felt the sting of her old life pressing on her chest again, the hushed insults of her late husband's sisters, the looks of pity, the church ladies whispering about her curse. The brand of barrenness never seemed to wash off, even here in a land so far removed from Dry Creek. Tassani left every morning before dawn, sometimes to hunt, sometimes, she suspected, to give her space. He spoke to her little, but never with coldness, only quiet. The children, however, remained. They didn't come close at first. They observed her like wary animals. Casa, the eldest, watched her every move like a hawk. The others hid behind hides or trees, curious but cautious. Clara began by doing what she could, mending clothes, gathering kindling, sweeping dust from the lodge. Not because anyone asked, but because it was all she knew how to offer. One afternoon, she noticed the youngest child, a boy no more than 3, staring at her from the shadows. He had a cut on his cheek, poorly scabbed over. Instinct pulled Clara forward. She knelt in front of him slowly, not to frighten him. "Hi there," she whispered. He said nothing, only sucked his thumb. She dipped a clean cloth in warm water and gently wiped the wound. He flinched but didn't cry. Then, unexpectedly, he leaned into her. Her heart clenched. No words. Just the quiet need of a child who missed being held. That night, the boy curled up outside her lodge, and no one stopped him. Wordless trust began to grow. The next day, a girl with tangled hair brought Clara a bundle of torn moccasins. Clara didn't know how to sew in the Comanche way, but she tried. The girl watched, then eventually sat down beside her, quietly correcting her every mistake. As the days passed, more children trickled into her orbit. They would never ask, but they would accept. A gentle hand here, a story there. One child let Clara braid her hair. Another asked her to help dig roots. She became a presence, not a mother, not yet, but something warm, something safe. But Casa remained distant, arms folded, eyes narrowed. She never smiled, never joined the others when they gathered around. Clara. One evening, as Clara sewed beside the fire, Casa stood just outside the glow. "You think they love you already?" The girl asked coldly. Clara looked up. "No," she said honestly, "but I love them." Casa scoffed. "You don't even know their names." Clara set her sewing down. "Then teach me." The girl hesitated. "You won't stay. They all leave." Clara swallowed. "I'm not going anywhere." Casa's expression darkened. "My real mother said that too." Then she disappeared into the night. Clara stared into the fire long after Casa was gone. That night, the pain in her chest was almost unbearable. Not from the child's harsh words, but from the truth in them. Clara had once made promises too. To a husband who didn't love her, to a home that had rejected her. She'd failed so many times. But this time, she would not run. The next morning, Clara gathered herbs and sweetgrass with two of the younger girls. They giggled when she stumbled over their names. One of them, Luyu, the quietest, handed her a carved wooden toy shaped like a bird. No words, just a gift. Later that day, a toddler cried from inside a lodge. No one answered. Clara stepped in without thinking. The baby had spilled hot broth on his leg. She scooped him up, soothed him with gentle rocking, and cooled the burn. When she stepped back out, several Comanche women were watching. One of them gave a slight nod, not approval, but acknowledgement. That night around the fire, the children curled close to her, one by one. Laughter flickered in the dark. Clara hummed a lullaby she barely remembered. A soft, small voice whispered something in Comanche beside her. She turned. The boy from days ago, the one with the cut cheek, looked up at her and whispered, "Naya." "What does that mean?" she asked softly. Tasani's voice came from behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. "It means guide," he said, then added after a pause, "or the one who helps others find their way." Clara blinked, swallowing back sudden emotion. She wasn't their mother yet, but maybe, just maybe, she was something they'd needed all along. The moon rose, full and quiet over the Comanche camp, casting silver shadows on the earth. The children were asleep, huddled in the warmth of the lodge Clara now shared with them. She sat alone by the fire, mending a torn tunic and listening to the wind move through the tall grass. She had been here 2 weeks. 2 weeks of learning, stumbling, adjusting to a life with no mirrors, no clocks, no expectations other than the silent ones, the kind you feel in glances, not commands. The children no longer feared her. They leaned into her, trusted her. But Tasani remained distant, like the mountain, steady, quiet, and unknowable. He was always watching, always protecting, but never revealing. That night, after the fire had burned low, Clara rose to gather more wood from the outer edge of the camp. As she rounded a low bend of brush, she paused. A figure knelt in the clearing beyond, alone and still. The moonlight revealed a broad back, bowed slightly in grief. It was Tasani. Before her brain could convince her to turn back, her feet carried her closer. He didn't move as she approached. Only when she knelt beside him did he speak. "She is buried here." Clara looked down. At first, she saw only grass and packed earth. Then she noticed the smooth stones arranged in a perfect oval. In the center was a small carving, a handprint over a heart. Simple, strong, sacred. "My wife," he said softly. "Sani, she died in the cold moon. Fever came fast." Clara folded her hands in her lap, unsure what to say. The night wrapped around them like a blanket too heavy to lift. "She was fierce," he continued, "not soft like you. She would have fought a bear for our children." "I'm not here to replace her," Clara said gently. "I know." He turned to her, eyes catching the moonlight. "But they look to you now, and I do not know what to do with that." The admission stunned her. It wasn't fear in his voice, it was pain. "You gave them life," Clara said. "But they need more than that now." He looked away. "I am tired, Clara. Tired of waking to crying and not knowing how to comfort. Of cooking without her, of braiding hair wrong, of pretending. I am still whole. You don't have to pretend with me." Tasani said nothing. For a long while, the only sound was the wind. Then he reached out and touched one of the stones, his hand large and weathered. "I buried a part of myself here. When I saw you on that auction block, I saw the same in your eyes. You were still breathing, but part of you had already died." Clara's throat tightened. He was right. Something had broken in her back in Dry Creek, shattered. When her husband's family sold her like unwanted furniture, she nodded slowly. "I didn't expect to live again after that day. I didn't think I deserved to." He turned his head, and for the first time, his eyes held no walls. "Why did you not fight them?" "I did, at first. But you can only be told you're worthless." So many times before you start to believe it. Tasani's gaze softened. But they were wrong. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. No one had ever said that to her, not even herself. She whispered, "And your people? What did they say about me? Some doubt you? They fear what is new. But that is not the children's fault, and it is not yours." Clara took a deep breath. "Do you regret bringing me here?" "No," he said instantly. "They smile now. They speak more. I have not seen light in this camp since Sani passed. Until you came," she looked down. "Even if I can't give you more children?" "You already have," he said simply. "You gave mine something they hadn't had in a long time, a reason to hope." Clara couldn't respond. She looked at the grave again. What was she like? She was wild, he smiled faintly. Strong like the river after the snow melts, but she was tired near the end. Too much loss. Too many winners. And me? Clara asked. What am I like? Tasani looked at her, long and deep. You are like the earth after fire. Blackened maybe, but alive, and ready for new things to grow. Clara blinked, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. The ache in her chest, years of shame, rejection, loneliness, seemed to loosen its grip in the stillness of night among the stones and spirits. A man mourning his wife and a woman mourning her worth finally saw each other not through grief, but through quiet understanding. They stayed there, side by side, until the stars shifted. The air felt strange that morning, thick, restless, too still. Even the birds were quiet. Clara stood outside the lodge, tying bundles of dried herbs, when Casa approached, face grim. Smoke, she said, pointing to the western ridge. Two. Close. Clara squinted toward the horizon. At first, it looked like just another hazy stretch of sky, but then she saw it. A black column curling into the air, slow and wide. Tasani's not back yet, Casa muttered, her voice sharp with tension. He had gone hunting with 2 other warriors the night before. Now, with the threat growing darker by the minute, the camp stirred with unease. Dogs barked nervously. Children clung to their mothers. An elder woman called out, issuing orders. Others began packing quickly blankets, tools, food, water. Is it close enough to burn us? Clara asked one of the women. The woman answered without looking, her voice taut. If the wind turns, it will come fast. No time to wait. Clara's heart pounded. She scanned the faces. All 6 children were still in the camp, but where would they go? Would Tasani know to find them? Casa grabbed Clara's arm. We need to help. What can I do? Clara asked, breathless. Casa's eyes narrowed. Keep the little ones together. Don't let them run. It was all the direction Clara needed. She gathered the 4 youngest near the edge of the open field, beside a wagon being loaded by 2 Comanche men. She spoke softly but firmly, trying to hide the panic in her voice. I need you to stay close. To me. No matter what, you don't leave my side. One boy, maybe 5, whimpered and reached for her hand. She took it and held tight. The heat in the air was rising. The wind shifted, and suddenly the smell of burning wood hit them all at once. It was coming. Someone shouted from the ridge. The fire jumped the trail. Panic erupted. The fire, once a distant warning, was now a living monster, leaping from tree to tree in a wave of black smoke and orange tongues. It hissed and roared like a beast let loose from the earth. Ash began to fall like dark snow. A stampede of horses bolted from a nearby pen. Clara turned to grab one of the children, the smallest, the toddler boy who'd called her Naya, but he wasn't there. Where is he? She shouted. Luyu pointed toward the woods. He ran. He was scared. Clara didn't hesitate. She sprinted into the brush, dodging branches and roots, heart hammering as the smoke thickened. She called his name over and over, but only the fire answered. Then she heard it, a whimper. The boy was crouched beside a tree, frozen in fear, his tiny hands covering his ears. Clara scooped him into her arms just as a flaming branch crashed behind her. Heat singed her face and arms, but she held tight to the boy, shielding him as she ran back toward the camp. She broke through the trees to see chaos. People screaming, wagons tipping, Casa running toward her. "Come on," Casa screamed. "We have to cross the stream." Clara followed, stumbling but determined. Her skirts caught on brambles, and her skin stung where ash and heat had burned her. But she didn't stop. Not once. She crossed the shallow stream with the others just as flames reached the edge of the camp. Tasani arrived moments later, covered in soot, eyes wild. When he saw Clara bloodied, burned, clutching his son, he stopped cold. He dropped to his knees and took the boy from her arms. Hugging him so tightly, it looked like he might never let go. Clara collapsed beside them, coughing, tears mixing. "With Ash, you ran into the fire?" he asked, voice hoarse. "He was alone," she rasped. "I couldn't leave him." Tasani stared at her, jaw clenched. "You could have died." Clara looked up at him. "So could he?" There was no answer to that doubt around them. The camp smoldered, partially saved but scarred. They had lost supplies, lodges, tools, but no lives. Not one. And that was in no small part because of Clara. That night, after the winds died and the stars returned, the elders gathered to give thanks. Clara sat quietly, her arms bandaged, her body sore. One of the elder women approached and placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "You are not a guest anymore," she said in broken English. "You bled with us." Casa said nothing, but when she lay down to sleep that night, she curled up beside Clara, resting her head on her shoulder like a child who'd finally let go. Tasani stood in the doorway of the lodge, watching them. The fire in his eyes was not from fear or danger. It was something deeper. Respect, gratitude, and something dangerously close to love. The fire had passed, but its scars remained. Blackened earth circled the outskirts of the camp. Lodges had been rebuilt with the help of every able hand. Clara's bandaged arms throbbed, but she worked alongside the women without complaint, braiding new rope, grinding corn, repairing tools. The children clung to her more than ever now, following her like ducklings wherever she went. But not everyone smiled at her presence. The whispers began 2 days after the fire. They came in hushed tones behind tents, in glances traded over cook fires, in the quiet stiffening of shoulders when Clara passed. She caught words she didn't understand spoken in Comanche, but the tone said everything. One morning, a woman refused Clara's offer to help gather water, snatching the bucket from her hand. Casa noticed the tension immediately. "They say you brought the fire," she said, voice low, eyes narrowed at the women gathered by the river. "That you're cursed. That the Great Spirit punishes our people because you stay here." Clara felt the heat crawl up her neck. "Why would they think that?" Casa looked away. "Because you can't have children." The words landed like a stone in her chest. It wasn't enough that she had risked her life to save one of their own. It wasn't enough that the children finally slept without nightmares. The same curse that haunted her in the white world had followed her here. 2 later that evening, as Clara stirred a pot of rabbit stew, an older woman approached with a stern expression. She said nothing but dropped a handful of dried sage into the flames and whispered something over the smoke. A cleansing. Clara understood what it meant. When Tasani returned from gathering wood, he found her sitting outside the lodge, silent, her face pale. "You know," she said quietly, "I thought if I came far enough from where I was born, the whispers would stop. But they follow me. Every place I go, I'm the woman who can't bear children. The woman who brings bad luck." Tasani sat beside her. His expression darkened. "They say you brought the fire. They say worse, she said. "And they won't stop unless you send me away. I won't do that." "But you might not have a choice," Clara replied, voice trembling. "One of them will make sure the elders listen. Someone who doesn't want me here." She didn't have to say the name Sayani, a widow of the tribe. Strong, respected, and once believed to be Tasani's future wife. She had never spoken to Clara directly, but her cold eyes spoke volumes. Sayani had lost her husband in a raid and raised 3 sons to manhood. She was everything Clara was not Comanche by blood, proven by motherhood, and rooted in the tribe's traditions. Later that night, the fire crackled low when Sayani entered the circle of elders. Clara sat with the children, braiding luyus hair when the whispers rose louder than ever. The elders began speaking in Comanche, the tone stern and formal. Tasani stood up without hesitation and strode toward them. Clara watched as he interrupted, his voice rising not in anger, but with the strength of command. Then he turned and called her name, Clara. The camp went still. She rose slowly and walked toward the fire, where the elders and half the tribe now gathered. One of the oldest Mena, weathered elder named Nokoni, stepped forward. "The people fear you bring imbalance," he said in English. "The fire, the change, the children clinging to someone not of our blood. They say a test must be done." Clara's hands trembled. "What kind of test?" "A test of the spirits, to see if the earth accepts you, if the Great Spirit allows you to stay. 3 tasks, each from a different elder. Courage, compassion, truth," Clara swallowed. "And if I fail, you will leave and never return." Silence fell. Then softly, behind her, Casa's voice broke through the quiet. "No." The girl stepped forward, trembling with rage. "She saved my brother. She feeds us. She sings to us when no one else remembers the words. She's not cursed, she's the first good thing that's happened since Mama died." Nokoni studied Casa, then turned back to Clara. "Will you accept the test?" Clara took a breath, then nodded. "Yes, whatever it takes." Sayani turned her head and walked away, but not before Clara saw the fury simmering beneath her calm face. Tasani looked at her, eyes unwavering. "You do not have to prove yourself to me, but if you walk through fire again, I will walk with you." And Clara knew in that moment she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the Fabi children, for the place she never thought she'd belong, for the first love she'd ever known, not loud or grand, but strong enough to silence every whisper. The next morning, the sun rose over the Comanche camp heavy with expectation. Smoke from breakfast fires curled into the still air. Women spoke in hushed tones. Children lingered near their mothers, glancing at Clara with wide, questioning eyes. Word had spread. The white woman was to be tested. 3 elders stood near the center fire, their backs straight, their eyes sharp. Each carried the authority of tradition rooted not in cruelty, but in something older than law, spiritual balance. In this world, every action echoed through generations, and every presence had to be accepted by more than just people. It had to be accepted by the land and the spirits. Tasani stood to the side, arms crossed, his face unreadable but his presence firm. He would not interfere. This was not a battle he could fight for her. Clara stood barefoot in the center of the circle, her hands steady even though her heart pounded. She wore a simple dress, her hair braided in the way the children had shown her. She had no ornaments, no charms, just her first test. Compassion. The first elder, Wyoming, a woman nearly blind with age, stepped forward. In her hands she held a pouch of crushed herbs and cloth strips. "You will tend to an old enemy," Wyoming said. "A man who once raided us and was captured last moon. His leg festers with poison. He spits when spoken to. You must heal him. Without anger, without judgment, Clara swallowed. Healing? She had no training beyond basic first aid, but she nodded and followed Wyoming into one of the outer lodges. Inside, the air was thick with infection. A thin, angry man with matted hair lay on a mat, his leg grotesquely swollen and wrapped in soiled cloth. When he saw Clara, he bared his teeth. White woman? Bah! Send a dog, not her. Clara knelt beside him silently. She didn't speak. She only set to work. She boiled water, cleaned the wound, and ground the herbs under Wyoming's whispered instructions. The man cursed at her, swatted at her, threatened her life in a language she didn't know. But Clara didn't stop. For hours she stayed, cleaning, wrapping, cooling his fevered brow. And when the pain broke him, when he finally sobbed with weakness, Clara held his hand and told him gently that the pain meant he was still alive. When she emerged from the lodge, the watching elders said nothing. But Wyoming gave a slow, satisfied nod. Second test. Courage. The second elder, Red Hawk, led her into the canyon beyond the camp. There, high above a dry riverbed, stood a ledge barely wide enough for a sleeping dog. On it sat a hawk's nest. He pointed to it. A storm blew down its tree last night. The mother did not return. One chick lives. Go. Bring it back without harming it or falling. Clara stared at the jagged ledge, her throat dry. The wind whispered like a warning, but she said nothing. She climbed out hand over hand, foot over foot, clinging to stone and root. Below her, the canyon yawned open like a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. Her fingers scraped raw. Her arms burned. But she didn't stop. She reached the nest. The baby hawk chirped weakly, featherless, fragile. She scooped it into her shirt, cradling it close to her chest. On the way down, a stone gave way. She slipped, her foot scraping against sharp rock. Pain tore through her ankle, but she clung to the cliff with her one free hand and didn't scream. She didn't let go. When she returned to camp, limping and bloodied, the hawk still nestled against her chest. Red Hawk looked away quickly, as if hiding a tear. Third test. Truth. The final test came from Nokoni, the elder who had first declared the trial. He offered no task, no physical ordeal. Instead, he led her back to the circle and said only this: speak your truth. The people gathered again. The fire snapped and crackled. Clara stood tall, her body aching, her bandages dark with blood. Her voice trembled, but she didn't let it break. I came here sold and unwanted. I believed I was nothing. I was told. I was cursed because I couldn't bear a child. And for a long time, I believed them. She paused, scanning the circle. Casa sat with the children, all watching her silently. I will never bear a child from my womb, but I have fed 6 mouths. I have soothed their cries. I have held them when no one else would. I have protected them from fire and from pain. She turned to the elders. I did not come here asking to be loved, only allowed to stay. But if your spirits cannot accept me as I am, then I will walk alone again. I will not pretend to be something I am not. Not anymore. The fire snapped. A long silence followed. Then Nokoni stepped forward and did something no one expected. He placed a strip of white-painted buckskin over her shoulders. The spirits do not ask for perfection, he said. Only truth and truth. She had given. The children ran to her first. Luyu hugged her waist. The toddler clapped. Even stubborn Casa smiled through her tears. Tasani stepped forward slowly, and this time, in front of them all, he took her hand and held it like it was sacred. She had walked through fire again, not to prove herself worthy, but to prove that she had always been worthy, even when the world said otherwise. The days after Clara's trial passed like warm wind through tall grass, gentle, steady, and strangely peaceful. She had been accepted. No more whispers. No more glances behind her back. The women who once turned away now greeted her with soft smiles and gifts of herbs, beads, or shared work. A young girl brought her a woven belt. Another woman offered to teach her how to tan hide the Comanche way. She was no longer the white woman among them. She was Naya the guide, the name the children had given her. But even as her place in the camp grew certain, one part of her life remained a mystery. Sani. He was still silent, still careful. He watched her, protected her, worked beside her, but he hadn't touched her since the night she'd saved his son from the fire. His presence was constant, but his intentions were still locked away, like a sealed chest she couldn't open. One late afternoon, Clara found herself in the stream behind the camp, washing garments while the younger children splashed nearby. Casa stood beside her, scrubbing a tunic in silence. "You haven't asked him yet," Casa said suddenly. Clara looked up, startled. "Asked who what?" Casa rolled her eyes like it was obvious. "My father. You haven't asked if he wants you." Clara blinked. "That's not something a woman just asks a man." Casa shrugged. "My mother would have. She always told the truth, even when it hurt." Clara looked down at the soap bubbles drifting along the water. "What if he doesn't want me the same way? What if I'm just safe for the children?" Casa's voice softened, her sarcasm melting. "You're not just safe. You're the first thing that made him smile again." That night, as the camp settled beneath a warm red sky, Clara stepped away from the lodge. Her heart beat too fast. Her palms were damp, but she had walked through fire. She had stared down shame and earned a place among people who didn't even speak her language at first. She would not live in fear anymore, not even of love. She found Tasani sitting alone at the edge of the hill that overlooked the open plains. He was carving something in wood, his hands moving slow and steady. Clara sat beside him, pulling her shawl tight. "What are you making?" He didn't look up. "A rattle. For Luyu's birthday." She nodded, watching the steady movement of his hands. "Do you ever think of her?" she asked softly. He paused for a moment. "Every day." "I'm not her," Clara said, voice barely above a whisper. "I never will be. I know." Silence fell. The sun bled into the horizon, casting their shadows long and stretching. "I didn't come here to take her place. I came because I had nowhere else. And I stayed because," her throat tightened, "because your children became mine. Because this place made me feel alive for the first time. Because you gave me dignity when the world stripped it from me." Finally, Tasani looked up. "I brought you here because I saw your eyes, Clara. I saw someone broken like I was. But you," he shook his head, voice rough, "you didn't stay broken. You stitched yourself back together with thread made from fire." Clara blinked, tears stinging her eyes. He reached into his coat and pulled something small from a pouch. Carved pendant, shaped like a feather wrapped in a ring of sun. He placed it in her hand. "My wife wore one like this. When she passed, I carved a second. I kept it in my pouch, waiting for the moment I could breathe again." He looked at her with a gaze that pierced through every wall she'd ever built. "You are not a stranger anymore. Not to my children. Not to my people, and not to me." Clara's heart pounded. "Then why haven't you said anything?" "Because I feared I'd break what you built for yourself. And I wanted you to choose not stay because you were rescued, but stay because you wanted this life." She didn't speak. She just reached out, placed her hand over his, and held it. "I choose you," she said simply. "Not because I need protection, not because I'm lost, but because I see you and I want to be seen in return." Tasani let out a breath like he'd been holding it for years. Then dashed slowly. Gently he leaned in and kissed her, not like a man claiming something, but like a man finally letting himself hope. Peace had settled over the camp like dew, quiet, calm, And Clara now walked among the Comanche not as a guest, but as one of them. The children no longer clung to her from fear but from love. Casa called her Naya with pride now. Even in front of others, Tasani no longer stood apart. His eyes found hers across fires, his hand grazed hers while they worked side by side. Their connection had deepened, not loud or boastful, but solid as bone. But peace, she had learned, was never promised in the wild land between two worlds. One morning, as Clara and two of the children returned from gathering wild onions, a rider appeared on the ridge above the camp, a lone man. On a dark horse, he wore a worn hat, a trail coat dusted in sand, and a pistol at his side. The moment Clara saw him, her breath hitched. He was white, and he wasn't lost out as he approached the edge of the camp. The Comanche men moved quickly. Tasani and two others rode out to meet him before he could cross into sacred ground. Clara stood frozen, children behind her, watching. The man didn't dismount. His voice carried over the wind. "I ain't here for trouble. Name's Deputy Royce Maynard Dry Creek." His voice was sharp Southern. "Came looking for a woman, Clara Weston." Every head turned. Clara felt as if her blood turned to stone. Deputy Maynard pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Got her name on this warrant. Her husband's family back in Dry Creek claims she stole a family heirloom before she ran off. Says she disappeared with silver and a brooch." Clara's mouth opened. "That's a lie." The camp went still. Tasani didn't move. He read the man like a hunter studies prey. "She stole nothing," he said, his voice steady but firm. "Well, sir," Maynard replied, "the courts say otherwise. She's listed as property still legally tied to the Weston estate. Widow or not, that family's rich and angry. They want her back." The children watched silently. Clara's heart pounded. Tasani's eyes never left the man. "She is not yours to take. She ain't yours to keep either, Comanche." The air snapped like a BOWSTRING. Clara stepped forward. "You tell the Weston family I'd rather rot in the desert than set foot in their house again. They beat me, sold me like livestock, and never once treated me like a person." Maynard raised an eyebrow. "I don't write the laws, ma'am. I just enforce 'em." "She belongs to no man," Tasani said coldly. "She is not property. She is the mother to my children and the keeper of my home." Maynard's lip curled, disgusted. "You think the courts in Amarillo care about some redskin love story?" The silence that followed was deadly. Clara saw it in Tasani's posture. He was ready to fight, to kill if it came to that. And maybe she was too, but Clara stepped between them. "No blood," she said, loud enough for both men to hear. "I'll settle it." She walked straight up to Maynard, close enough to see the dust caked in the creases of his weather-worn face. "You take that paper back to the Weston family," she said, voice low and steel strong, "and you tell them if they ever send another man after me, they'll be dragging him home in pieces." Maynard blinked. "You threatening an officer?" Clara leaned in. "I'm reminding you I have nothing left to lose, and no court in Texas wants to tangle with a Comanche camp if they value peace." Maynard hesitated. Then finally, muttering under his breath, he crumpled the paper and turned his horse. "I don't get paid enough for this." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Enjoy your fairy tale, ma'am." He rode away without another word. The camp stood frozen for a beat. Then slowly, quietly, people returned to their tasks. Clara didn't move until Tasani stepped beside her. "You didn't need me to protect you," he said, a faint smile in his voice. She turned to him, her eyes clear. "No, but knowing you, would it give me the strength to do it myself?" Tasani reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You are not the woman they left behind," Clara nodded. "No, I'm the woman they'll never get back." That night, as the stars brightened the sky, Clara sat beside the fire with the children, weaving a new belt from horsehair and sinew. They laughed and told stories, safe in the knowledge that this woman once marked Barren, once sold off like cattle, had faced the world that rejected her and sent it riding away in dust. Weeks passed. The moon waxed and waned. The air grew warmer, drier. Summer crept across the plains like a silent promise. But peace held. No one else came riding from Dry Creek. No new threats. No more whispers. Clara woke each morning with the soft sounds of children breathing beside her. She rose with the sun and worked until her hands were dusty and her skin bronzed. Her heart no longer feared quiet because now it meant safety, not loneliness. Tasani watched her often. Not like he once did, from a distance, uncertain but with unspoken pride, as if every small thing she did proved something sacred. He would ride out with the others and return with meat. He would sit at her side when the children slept. They didn't need to fill the space with chatter. Their silence had grown full, comfortable, warm. But one morning, as the wildflowers bloomed across the ridges and the children played in the stream, Tasani brought her to a hill she hadn't yet seen. It overlooked the valley, the entire stretch of Comanche land beneath it. A wide clearing stood at the summit, framed by wind-worn trees and scattered stones. "I used to come here with Sanny," he said quietly, "when she was still well. She said the wind spoke clearer here." Clara nodded, her voice caught in her throat. "It's beautiful." He handed her something wrapped in soft hide. She unfolded it slowly. A dress. Handmade, stitched with care, the colors earthy and bold. Beads sewn into the hem. Along the edge of the collar, feathers and small tokens from the children. Buttons, a smooth blue rock, even a carved bone Casa had once made. Clara touched it like it might vanish. "I made it," he said. "With the children, for you." Her voice trembled. "Why?" Tasani took her hands. "Because the others saw a woman marked by emptiness. But I saw a woman who created a family without ever giving birth. You took what was broken and built something stronger. That is what mothers do." Tears slipped down her cheeks, quiet and unashamed. "You don't need to be one of us by blood to belong," he said. "But if you want to be, this dress means we choose you." Clara's breath caught. "I already chose you," she whispered. Then, with his voice steady, grounded in the same calm power she had come to love, Tasani asked, "Will you marry me?" "In a way, not by paper, not by law, but by fire and wind and witness?" Clara nodded, unable to speak. The ceremony came with the setting sun. No church. No preacher. Just the circle of the tribe, the fire burning, and the elders watching with quiet reverence. Clara wore the dress he made with his own hands. The children stood at her side. Casa held her hand. Luyu brushed her hair. The toddler clung to her leg, like he had always been hers. Tasani stepped forward, his hair tied, face marked with the ochre of tradition. He said the words not in English, but in Comanche. Clara didn't understand every syllable, but she knew what they meant. He spoke of joining souls, of choosing one another in life and in hardship, of becoming more than two. When it was her turn, she said no vows, only placed her hands on his chest and whispered, "You are where I was always meant to arrive." The tribe cheered, not loudly, but with joy full of respect. This was not a celebration of spectacle. It was a recognition of something sacred, the building of a home in the least likely place. Later that night, after the drums quieted and the children slept, Clara and Tasani sat by the dying embers of the fire, wrapped in a shared blanket. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Bringing me here?" Tasani shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I regret not bringing you home sooner." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I was told I'd never be a mother," she said. "You were lied to," he replied. Clara smiled. and I was told no man would ever want me." He looked down at her. "They didn't see you. I did." And in that final, quiet moment, with the stars overhead and the plains stretching wide beneath them, Clara Weston, once discarded, once called barren, once sold for her shame, finally understood. She had not just found love. She had become it. In a warrior's arms, in a child's laugh, in a land that had tried to break her but ended up making her whole. She had not just survived, she had come home.